She asked for a break to reconnect with her ex, so I walked away, sold our house, and vanished without a trace. Liam sat there, staring at Tessa as she absent-mindedly scrolled through her phone, a faint smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. The warmth of their shared apartment felt hollow, as if the air had shifted in ways he couldn't understand. He had always imagined their future together marriage, a family, a life full of love and support. But now, as he watched Tessa lose interest in their wedding plans, something in him started to break. He remembered the early days, how she would excitedly talk about wedding dresses and tiny details like flower arrangements. But now, it was as if every question he asked was met with a shrug or a distant, "I'll think about it later." It hurt. The woman he had envisioned his life with seemed to be slipping away, and he couldn't pinpoint the exact moment when it all began to unravel. He tried to convince himself that it was just the stress of work or the pressure of planning such a big event, but deep down, he couldn't ignore the growing distance between them. It wasn't just the wedding plans, it was the way she no longer looked at him the same way. The love that once felt so certain was now a quiet, painful question in his mind. Why didn't he see this coming? Why didn't he notice the subtle signs of her withdrawing until it was too late? He was left wondering if this had always been the way it was meant to end, or if he was just too blind to see it until now. Liam couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in his chest ever since Tessa's withdrawal. It started off as small moments, sudden disinterest in their wedding plans. The way she seemed distant during what should have been the most exciting times of their relationship. He remembered how she used to be so engaged, excited about the colors of the centerpieces, the style of the dress, the little details that would make their day perfect. But now, it was like she was a different person, someone he couldn't reach no matter how much he tried. Every question he asked about the wedding seemed to irritate her, as if it were a burden rather than a joy. "Have you decided on your bridesmaids?" he would ask, but the response was always the same. "I'm still thinking about it." It was never anything concrete, never any real answers. He had seen the spark in her eyes fade, replaced with a blankness that made his heart ache. He tried to convince himself that it was just stress from work, from the overwhelming task of planning a wedding. But deep down, Liam knew something was wrong. Tessa was becoming more and more elusive. Her smile no longer reached her eyes. Her laughter was less frequent, and there were nights when she would just sit in silence, her mind seemingly. He had always prided himself on understanding people, on being able to read between the lines. But now he found himself lost in a sea of confusion. Why was she pulling away from him? Was it the pressure of the wedding? Or was it something deeper? Was it him? The questions began to gnaw at him, even during the moments when they were supposed to be enjoying their time together. There were no more late-night conversations, no more deep talks about their hopes and dreams for the future. There was just silence, and uncomfortable, oppressive silence that filled their apartment like an unspoken truth. Liam would try to fill the void with small talk, asking about her day, making plans for the weekend, but it always felt like he was talking to a stranger. She had stopped sharing her thoughts with him, stopped letting him into the parts of her life that once felt like they belonged to them both. It was as if she was pulling away, brick by brick, from the relationship they had built. And then, there was the night when everything came to a head. They were out with friends, enjoying what should have been a casual, fun evening. But when the question was asked, if you could relive any relationship, which one would it be? Liam didn't expect what happened next. Without hesitation, Tessa blurted out the name of her ex, Dylan. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. She quickly tried to backtrack, laughing awkwardly and saying, "It's just a game. Don't take it seriously." But Liam couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a game for her. Why would she even think about him? Why would she even bring him up? Dylan, the one who had cheated on her, the one who had broken her heart. Later that night, when they were alone, Liam asked her about it. He couldn't let it go. Why Dylan? Why not their future? But Tessa shrugged it off, as if it was no big deal. Her indifference cut deeper than anything she could have said. That moment, that small yet telling comment, was the first time Liam realized that he wasn't the one she was thinking about anymore. She wasn't thinking about their wedding, or the life they were supposed to share. She was thinking about him, Dylan. And that realization felt like a cold slap to the face. Liam tried to push the thought away, to tell himself that it didn't mean anything. But deep inside, he knew something had changed. The woman he had loved, the woman he had planned his entire future with, was no longer the same person, and he didn't know how to get her back, or even if he could. The silence in the apartment had never felt so oppressive. Liam stood in the doorway, staring at Tessa, his fiancée, as she sat motionless on the couch. The weight of her words, "I need a break to figure out things with Dylan," echoed through his mind like a constant drumbeat. His body felt numb, almost disconnected from reality. The room spun as he tried to process the depths of what she had just said. This wasn't just a break. No, it was a betrayal. It was the final confirmation of everything he had feared, but refused to see. He thought he knew her. He thought he understood her. 4 years together, countless plans, dreams of a life they were supposed to build. And yet here she was, asking him to step aside so she could figure out her feelings for the man who had once hurt her. Dylan, her ex, the one who had cheated on her, very one she had sworn to leave behind. Liam's heart twisted with disbelief and anger, the knot in his chest tightening as he stood there, unable to comprehend how quickly everything was falling apart. How could she be so callous, so certain that he would just wait around for her to make up her mind? Liam's mind raced, filled with a whirlwind of emotion, rage, and a growing sense of betrayal. His stomach churned as he struggled to stay composed. He had loved Tessa with everything he had. He had imagined their future together, each small detail adding to the larger picture. And now, with one simple request, she had shattered that picture, leaving him standing in the ruins of what he thought was a perfect love. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms, fighting the urge to scream, to demand answers, to demand that she see the depth of the pain she was causing. But instead, he felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. It was as if something inside of him had clicked into place. He was done. He wasn't going to beg her to stay. He wasn't going to wait around to be her backup plan. "Do you really think this is fair?" Liam's voice was eerily calm. Too calm. The words felt foreign coming from him, but there was a quiet power behind them, a strength he hadn't realized he possessed until now. Tessa looked up, startled by his composed demeanor, and opened her mouth to respond, but he cut her off. "You don't get to keep me hanging on while you figure out whether you want to be with your ex. This is not how love works, Tessa. This is not how we work." She seemed taken aback, her eyes wide with surprise, as if she had expected him to fight for her, to beg her not to leave. But he wasn't going to do that. Not this time. Not when she had already made her choice. Tessa began to protest, but Liam held up a hand, silencing her. "I'm not asking for permission, Tessa. I'm telling you what I need." His words hung in the air, thick with finality. "I need to move on from this. I need to rebuild my life. And I can't do that while waiting for you to figure out if I'm good enough for you." With that, he turned, his back to her, feeling the weight of his decision settle in his bones. Every step he took away from her felt like a step toward reclaiming the parts of himself that had been lost in the chaos of their relationship. The woman he had loved so deeply had just shown him how easily she could let go of him. And in that moment, Liam realized that he didn't need to hold on to someone who could so casually throw him aside. As he reached the door, he heard Tessa's voice crack, her final plea for him to wait, to understand. But Liam didn't look back. He couldn't. He knew that if he did, it would be too easy to fall back into the trap she had set. This was it. there would be no going back. With a deep breath, he opened the door, stepping into the unknown, leaving behind the ruins of a life he had once dreamed of. For the first time in weeks, Liam felt the weight of his past lift off his shoulders. He was free, and there was no turning back. The tension in the air was thick, heavier than ever before. Liam could feel it as he walked into the apartment that evening, his mind already racing with thoughts of what had been happening between them. He had arrived home early, expecting a quiet night in with Tessa perhaps. A dinner, maybe even a movie. It was supposed to be one of those rare, peaceful moments they used to share. But as soon as he stepped through the door, something felt off. The silence hit him like a brick wall. There was no music playing, no sounds of Tessa moving around or getting ready for dinner. He found her sitting on the couch, her laptop in front of her, but she wasn't working. She was staring at the screen, her face unreadable. A chill crept up his spine. Tessa was always so engaged, so energetic when she was with him. But now, she seemed completely detached. He greeted her, but she barely acknowledged his presence. She muttered something about him being early, a strange, almost defensive tone in her voice. Liam's heart began to race, a gnawing unease bubbling up from within. He had seen this kind of behavior before: the sudden withdrawal, the avoidance, the coldness. It was a feeling he couldn't shake, one that had been growing for weeks. The little signs of the distance, the lack of enthusiasm had finally converged into this moment of undeniable truth. Tessa wasn't just pulling away from their wedding plans. She was pulling away from him. After what seemed like an eternity, Tessa looked at him. Her eyes were distant, not the eyes of the woman he thought he knew. And then, in the quietest, most casual tone, she dropped the bomb. "I've been thinking about us. And about Dylan." The words hung in the air, and Liam's world seemed to stop. His heart pounded in his chest, and his breath caught in his throat. Dylan, her ex. The one who had cheated on her. The one she'd supposedly loved. He didn't know where he was. Had he heard her correctly? Did she just say she needed to explore things with him? The room spun, and for a moment, he felt completely paralyzed, unable to speak, unable to move. His mind raced, his thoughts tumbling over each other, trying to process the weight of her words. She wanted to break a break, to figure out whether she still had feelings for Dylan. Liam stood there, the silence between them more deafening than any argument they had ever had. He felt as though his entire world was unraveling before him, thread by thread. How could she do this? How could she ask for time to decide between him and the man who had hurt her, who had broken her trust? This wasn't just a break, it was a betrayal. He asked her, his voice shaking despite his best efforts to remain calm. "You want to go back to him? After everything? After all we've been through?" Her reply was a weak excuse, but it was too late. Liam had already seen enough. The man he thought he was going to spend the rest of his life with, the woman he thought would be his partner forever, was no longer the person he had trusted. Without a word, he made a decision. His body moved almost of its own accord, a quiet strength emerging from somewhere deep inside him. He wasn't going to beg. He wasn't going to plead. He wasn't going to wait around to be someone's second choice. This was the end of their story. "Fine," he said, his voice low but steady. "Take your break. But don't expect me to be here when you're done." He turned and walked out, leaving Tessa standing there, speechless, the weight of her decision hanging heavily in the air. This wasn't just a breakup. This was the moment he reclaimed his life. Liam's heart was pounding in his chest as he walked through the door, the cool evening air carrying with it a sense of finality. The weight of the decision he had just made still hung heavy on his shoulders. He had told Tessa what he needed, what he deserved, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, He was free from the toxic grip of her indecision. The silence that greeted him when he entered their now empty home felt like a different kind of void. It was no longer a space filled with the dreams they had built together, but a cold, oppressive reminder of everything that had gone wrong. The house, once a symbol of their future, now felt like a prison. Every piece of furniture, every photograph on the wall, felt like an anchor to a past he was desperate to escape. He had taken the first step by selling it, but now it was time for the next move. Liam had always prided himself on his ability to stay level-headed, to make logical decisions even when emotions were high. But now, as he stood in the midst of the empty rooms, the anger, the hurt, and the betrayal surged through him like a tidal wave. He wasn't angry in the way he thought he would be. No, this wasn't the rage of a man who had been cheated on, or even of a man who had been cast aside for someone else. This was the quiet fury of a person who had realized that the love he had fought so hard to build had never been as real as he thought. He could still hear her voice in his mind, her words, pleading for him to wait, for him to understand. The audacity of her request for a break, to explore her feelings for Dylan, still burned him from the inside. He had loved her. He had planned his life around her. And now, she was asking for the luxury of time to figure out whether or not he was enough. The irony of it all stung, because for so long, he had been the one waiting for her to make a decision, waiting for her to choose him over her past. But now, the roles had shifted. Now, it was time for him to choose himself. His hands shook as he grabbed his phone. He had to act fast. His friend Noah had been the first one to tell him not, to just sit back and wait for Tessa to return when things fell apart. He had been right. The more Liam thought about it, the more he realized he had been treating her indecision like a personal failure. But no more. This wasn't a punishment for Tessa, it was about reclaiming his life. The phone call to the realtor was swift. He had already made his decision. The house, their house, was as good as gone. His mind was already on the next step, leaving the city, leaving the remnants of his life with Tessa behind. The West Coast job was his opportunity to start over, to truly begin anew. It wasn't just about the job, it was about finding peace again. When he hung up, Liam felt something shift inside him. There was no more waiting. There was no more holding on to what could have been. The pain of betrayal would eventually fade. But this was his freedom. The next chapter of his life had already begun, and there was no looking back. Tessa would never understand how deeply she had hurt him, but Liam didn't need her to. He didn't need anything from her anymore. This was his time to rise from the ashes of a broken relationship, to become the man he had always been meant to be: strong, independent, and unafraid of what the future held. As the last box was packed, and the final traces of Tessa's presence were erased from his life, Liam stood in the doorway of what had once been their home. He didn't feel sad. He didn't feel regret. He felt liberated. And for the first time in months, he smiled. The weight was finally lifted. It was time to move forward. The moment Liam walked away from Tessa, it felt like he was stepping into a new life, a life he had almost forgotten existed. The air around him felt sharper, fresher, as if the burden he'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted from his shoulders. His heart was racing, and yet, for the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't feel weighed down. He had made a choice that was both terrifying and exhilarating. But as the days passed, the reality of his decision began to settle in. Tessa had tried to reach out. At first, it was a soft message, a seemingly innocent text asking if he was okay. It seemed almost casual, as if she expected him to respond with the same nonchalance, to pick up the pieces and slide back into the life they had once shared. But Liam wasn't going to be that man anymore. He ignored her message. He ignored the following texts. When the phone call started, he let them go straight to voicemail. His hand trembled every time he saw her name flash across the screen. But he knew that if he answered, he would be pulled back into the web of guilt and doubt. He wasn't going to fall for it again. He was this, but then he left it as He became more frantic, more desperate. The texts went from asking if he was okay to pleading for him to come back. Her words were laced with sorrow, with regret, with the kind of desperation that he had seen in her eyes when she begged for forgiveness after their arguments. He knew that look, and it always made him feel like he had to make things right. But not anymore. The first time he heard her voice again was a week after he had left. It was a Thursday evening, and Liam had just finished packing the last of his belongings, preparing for the move that would take him far away from everything he had known. His phone rang, and for the briefest moment, he thought about ignoring it. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the final shred of curiosity, or maybe it was just the sheer weight of her presence that still lingered in his mind. He answered the call, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tessa." There was silence on the other end before she spoke, her voice trembling. "Liam, don't know what I was thinking. I was confused. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, just talk to me." The raw emotion in her voice hit him harder than he had anticipated. For a moment, he was back in that living room with her, holding her hand, listening to her laugh, imagining their future together. But then, just as quickly, he remembered why he had left. He remembered her request for a break, the way she had casually thrown away their relationship for someone else. And it hit him harder than any physical blow could. She had never really chosen him. She had never truly committed to him. "I don't want to do this, Tessa," he said, his voice cracking with emotion he didn't want to admit. "I don't want to be your backup plan. I deserve more than that. I deserve someone who is all in, someone who chooses me, not someone who keeps me on the shelf while they figure out their feelings for someone else." Tessa's sobs came through the phone, and for a brief second, he felt a pang of guilt. He had always been the one to fix things, to smooth over the messes in their relationship. But this time, he wasn't going to be the one to fix it. This time, he wasn't going to sacrifice himself for her. "I'm not coming back, Tessa. This is over," he said, his voice steady, despite the storm of emotions raging inside him. "You made your choice when you asked for that break. You made your choice when you couldn't commit to me. And now, I'm making mine. I'm moving on." There was a long pause, and for a moment, Liam thought maybe she had hung up. But then, she whispered, "Please, Liam. I don't know how to fix this." He shook his head, even though she couldn't see him. "You can't fix this. You had your chance. I'm done." With that, he ended the call. The finality of it hit him like a ton of bricks. He had made the hardest decision of his life, and it wasn't going to be easy. He knew that Tessa would try to come back, to apologize, to beg him to reconsider. But he also knew that he couldn't go back to that life. He couldn't go back to being the person he was before. As he set the phone down, a strange calm settled over him. He was moving forward. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he could finally breathe. Tessa's chapter in his life was over, and as painful as it was, he knew it was the only way to move on. There would be no turning back. His future was his own now, and no one, not even Tessa, would take that from him again. The days following his conversation with Tessa were filled with a strange mixture of liberation and unease. As Liam prepared for his move, his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. But there was a clarity that had finally emerged, something he hadn't felt in months. Every step he took, packing up the last remnants of his life with Tessa, felt like he was shedding skin, leaving behind the person he used to be, the man who had loved and trusted so completely. But deep down, a nagging voice in his mind asked if he was truly ready for the life that lay ahead. It wasn't the move itself that made him feel unsettled. No, it was the aftershocks of what had happened. Tessa's attempts to reach out had intensified, and despite his resolve to ignore her, he couldn't escape the pull of her messages. She texted him. At all hours, some messages were simple, like, "Are you okay?" or, "I hope you're doing well." But the tone had shifted, becoming more frantic and desperate. And then there was the voicemail, the one that made his stomach churn as he listened to it late one night. Her voice was raw, full of sorrow and regret, but beneath it all, there was a palpable sense of entitlement, as if she still expected him to accept her back. "I made a mistake, Liam," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "I never meant for this to happen. Please, can we talk? Please don't let it end like this. I still love you." Liam's heart wrenched as he listened to her, but he knew that he couldn't go back. The woman on that voicemail wasn't the same person he had fallen in love with. This was a woman trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage, trying to rewrite history and erase the betrayal that had torn them apart. He gripped his phone tighter, the weight of her words heavy in his hands. As much as he wanted to, as much as part of him ached to hear her say those things, he couldn't afford to let her back into his life. He had spent too long being her emotional safety net, waiting for her to decide if she wanted him, waiting for her to give him the love and commitment he deserved. But now he realized that waiting was a prison, and he was finally breaking free. The next day, as the movers came to take the last of his things, Liam's phone buzzed again. Another message from Tessa. This time, it was different. It was less pleading, more demanding. "Where are you, Liam?" it read. "Why aren't you responding to me? This is ridiculous. You can't just walk away from everything we've built." Liam stared at the message, the anger bubbling up inside him. How dare she? How dare she make it seem like he was the one who had abandoned everything? She had made the choice. She had chosen to pursue Dylan, chosen to walk away from him when things got tough, and now she was trying to turn the tables. But this time, he wasn't going to let her. He dialed her number without hesitation, and as the phone rang, he felt the rush of adrenaline in his veins. She picked up on the second ring, and her voice immediately surged through the line, frantic and hopeful. "Liam, please, where are you? We need to talk. You don't understand what I'm going through." Her words hit him like a slap, but he held his ground, his voice calm and controlled. "No, Tessa, you don't understand. I've already made my decision, and you need to respect that. I'm done waiting for you. I'm done being your backup plan. I'm done being the person you call when everything else falls apart." There was silence on the other end, a long, aching pause where Liam could almost hear her heart breaking. He could feel the weight of the moment, the finality of his words. But he knew that if he gave her an inch now, he would be back where he started, on the edge of uncertainty, trapped in the limbo of her indecision. "You can't just throw away everything we had, Liam," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I made a mistake. I'll do anything to fix this. Please don't walk away." Liam's chest tightened as he listened, but his resolve only strengthened. He had heard it all before: the apologies, the promises, the empty declarations of love. But nothing had changed. She had made her choice when she asked for a break, when she decided that Dylan was worth another shot. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," Liam said firmly, his voice unwavering. "I'm asking for peace, and I'm not going to get that by continuing to let you drag me back into this mess. It's over, Tessa. I'm moving on." He could hear her sobbing now, but there was no turning back. The tears didn't change anything. Her pain didn't change anything. This was his moment to take control of his life, and no amount of regret or guilt would change that. With a deep breath, he ended the call. The phone slipped from his fingers, and he stood there for a moment, looking around the room that had once been theirs, now emptied of everything that had tied him to her. Liam had never felt more free, yet at the same time, more uncertain. The finality of his decision to leave everything behind: Tessa, the house, the life they had planned together, was both terrifying and exhilarating. He could still hear her voice echoing in his mind, the desperation and pain so raw, so real. But there was no going back. As the last remnants of his old life were packed away, he found himself standing at the precipice of a new beginning. It had been a week since he made the decision to sell their house and move away. He had cut ties with everything that connected him to Tessa. No more messages, no more calls. The silence that followed felt like a weight being lifted off his shoulders, but it also felt like an open wound. He had walked away from love, from the woman he had thought he would marry. He had chosen to reclaim his life. And yet, as the days passed, the reality of that choice gnawed at him. But the hardest part had already come and gone. Now, it was about moving forward, about finding peace in the chaos. He had already secured a new job in San Francisco, a fresh start on the other side of the country. It was an opportunity he couldn't pass up, a chance to rebuild, to reinvent himself. But as he packed up his belongings, part of him couldn't help but wonder if he was running away from the ghosts of his past. The phone rang. He hesitated for a moment before checking the screen. It was from Tessa. For a brief moment, he felt the pull and urge to pick up and hear her voice again, to see if maybe, just maybe, things had changed. But then, he remembered. He remembered her asking for a break to explore her ex, the way she had taken everything they had, and tossed it aside like it meant nothing. The realization hit him hard. He wasn't the one who had walked away. She had made that choice, and now he was choosing to move on. With a deep breath, Liam hit decline, feeling a surge of empowerment with every second that passed. This wasn't a game. This wasn't about playing by her rules anymore. This was about him, about reclaiming everything she had taken for granted. He stared at the phone for a moment, his thumb hovering over the screen. He almost wanted to send her a message, something simple, something to close the chapter. But no, there was no need for words anymore. His actions had already spoken louder than anything he could say. The very next day, he received another message from Tessa. Her tone had changed again, less pleading this time and more frustrated. She wasn't going to let him go that easily. "Why are you doing this, Liam?" the message read. "You can't just walk away. We've been together for 4 years. You owe it to us to at least talk. I'm not the villain here." The audacity of it struck him like a slap in the face. Tessa still didn't get it. She still didn't see what she had done. She thought that after everything, after the lies, after the betrayal, she could just ask for a break, and he would be there, waiting for her to figure it out. But that wasn't how love worked. That wasn't how respect worked. Liam sat down, his hands trembling as he typed the response. It wasn't out of anger anymore. It wasn't out of resentment. It was just the truth. "You made your choice, Tessa, and I made mine. You wanted a break, you wanted space, and now you're asking for more. I can't keep doing this. I'm done." He stared at the message, his finger hovering over the send button. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he hesitated, but then something shifted within him. He wasn't going to keep holding on to something that wasn't meant for him anymore. He wasn't going to let her pull him back into her world of confusion and indecision. He wasn't going to be her backup plan. With a steady hand, he pressed send. He sat there for a moment, the weight of his words hanging in the air. And then, he felt the release. The sense of finality. There was no turning back now. The phone buzzed in his hand almost immediately, but he didn't look at it. He didn't need to. He had said everything he needed to say. And now, it was time to walk away for good. As Liam finished packing the last of his things, he felt the weight of the past year lift off his shoulders. He was free. Not just from Tessa, but from the life he had been living, from the uncertainty and the heartache. It wasn't easy. It would never be easy, but it was necessary. And as he locked the door behind him, leaving the empty house behind, he didn't look back. The future was waiting for him, and for the first time in months, Liam could finally see it clearly. The road ahead was his to walk, and he was ready to take the first step towards something new, something better.